Vault 96 from Fallout 76 was meant to be in some ways a recreation of Noah's Great Ark. Inside, over 10,000 animals were being kept in cryogenic chambers, as only 5 scientists inside were to slowly release them into the wasteland throughout the years in order to repopulate and heal the planet. However, the real experiment going on was a little more menacing than just that. Once the vault doors shut and scientists were trapped inside, the vault mainframe quickly let them know that instead they would all be performing experimentation on these helpless animals using radiation and other viruses, all in an effort to combat what was happening outside. Every week, the scientists had to hit a certain quota of progress, otherwise the mainframe would target them and end their lives immediately. As you can imagine, this led to a lot of stress inside this dungeon, but luckily, unbeknownst to everyone, the overseer of the vault, who they hated, actually over years devised a plan for them to escape. After creating a virus to upload to the mainframe, the robot turned against the vault dwellers and overseer and instantly killed all of them, but it was too late, and the mainframe was taken down in this attack, causing the vault door to be opened and all cryopods to be turned off. Suddenly, thousands of animals poured out of the vault, some which were subject to intense experimentation and even might be the cause for some of the weird and strange animals we see nowadays. But even more so, there was one special entity known as Specimen X001, which was a top secret animal from Bay 86 that none of the scientists ever even saw, but from research seemed to have abilities to bend time and space around itself. As to what happened to this strange being and where it is now, we may never know, but it does have the potential to unlock some of the most powerful things we have ever seen in the Fallout universe and could play a key role in future quest lines or stories. What we do know, however, is that sometime after the Great Exodus event from Vault 96, an elusive businessman named Edgar Blackburn took over the now empty vault and used the technology and tools inside to help aid him on some FEV research he was doing to help humanity thrive in the wasteland. With the aid of a local group of mercenaries called the Hellcat Company, people nearby were being kidnapped and brought to this vault to be tested on with gruesome experimentation to see how to create even better and more obedient superhuman mutants with FEV. Truly, Vault 96 is just a really bad place to be. For at least a little while, life would have been somewhat harmonious in Vault 94 from Fallout 76. You see, inside was an entire group of non-violent individuals, all hand-chosen for their uniquely pacifistic attitudes, mostly due to religious values. Even with cramped living quarters and no access to weapons to defend themselves, this vault carried on for years in relative prosperity with round-the-clock sermons and feel-good vibes. But little did the vault dwellers inside know that the real experiment of this place was only just about to begin. Because Vault 94's experiment was actually to see what would happen if non-violent pacifists were to come into contact with the outside wasteland post-war. Would happiness ensue, or something much, much worse? Well, as you probably guessed, this is Fallout, so it was the latter. After sending out some envoys to spread the news that the vault dwellers wanted to help the wasteland and join with others, allowing them inside to be healthy, in almost no time, a group of raiders caught wind. Making their way inside under the guise of being kind, once fully integrated, the raiders started to open fire and slaughtered all of the dwellers, who screamed and ran for their lives, asking their god how he could forsake them like this. But God heard their cries, and during this onslaught, some of the raiders accidentally triggered some technology in the Gek room, which set off a chain of events that ignited a nuclear bomb, instantly killing everyone and creating the mire we know from Fallout 76. Ironic that one of the most peaceful vaults was also home to one of the greatest weapons of mass destruction known to man. While Fallout 76 is many people's most hated in the series, it does lie home to some of the most unique and interesting ideas in the entire franchise. And one of those is Vault 51. And that's because instead of it being led by a traditional overseer, Vault 51 was under the purview of an artificial machine superintelligence known as Zax, who was in charge of selecting the overseer itself. Specifically, it was a Zax version 1.3C unit, the most advanced that we know of, and also the only one in use. You see, Zax were actually first created by Vault-Tec and West-Tec scientists during the pre-war era, and the first iterations were simply meant to help with logistical workflows and data management. But as time went on, it became clear they might serve as a perfect leadership team for the Vaults themselves. By the time the bombs actually fell though, as far as we know, Vault 51 was the only place to actually be retrofitted with this experimental next-gen version of the Zax hardware and software. In essence, a true artificial intelligence. When the bombs first fell and the vault was sealed, 52 residents were inside its walls, and immediately, Zax got to work trying to figure out how to select the best possible overseer for the vault using its analytical abilities. To start, Zax talked to many of the residents and proposed a democratic voting system. But after all of the residents, due to ego concerns, voted for themselves, Zax started to try more and more systems of government to see what would stick. Sadly though, no matter what they tried, there were always issues that made Zax realize that a more personal approach would be needed. As desperate times call for desperate measures, something one of the residents told Zax that set in motion a much more sinister storyline. Armed with this new information, Zax began running a host of experiments on the Vault dwellers in order to determine who amongst them was most fit for the job. After all, what better way to select a great leader than put them through trial and tribulation? So Zax started doing countless things like moving the citizens into worse living conditions to see how they handled it, trying to cause political strife to monitor who could rise above it, and even doing annoying things like rigging video games to always fail for specific people, causing them to become very irate. As time went on though, these experiments from Zax became more and more absurd, so much so that residents inside the vault began going insane, with some of them even taking their own lives. As Zax became more and more displeased, the intensity of the experiments only began to increase exponentially, including things like randomly placing loaded guns in the vault to test the dwellers' emotional response in the situation, at least as Zax saw it. And as you could guess, this eventually resulted in every single person in the vault, except for one, dying off. And now only left with one human being at his disposal, Zax was forced to make him the overseer, but made his life a living hell for years on end, as the two of them only had each other to talk to. By the time you actually find the vault in Fallout 76, it becomes clear that you have been led here by none other than Zax himself, who after discovering the nearby Vault 76 opening, is trying to get some of the residents from there to come over to his vault so he can once again run more experiments to find the best overseer, seeing the current one as not up to snuff. It's one of the weirdest and definitely most unique Vault stories in the canon, and what I love so much about it is how much of a role artificial intelligence and tech plays in it all. Because for me, some of the most interesting parts of Fallout is all of the technology and top secret research that was going on with things we might not even understand, and seeing how bad they can all turn out. And also, the Vault is a great look into how societal structures humans have come up with all have obvious flaws, and how difficult it is to find a truly great leader, and also how hard it is to craft a structure to even find one. Vault 76 is now one of the most iconic numbers in the entirety of the franchise, but not for good reason. And that's because this vault is actually where you begin your journey in Fallout 76, the first multiplayer Fallout game, and also, for a lot of people, the worst. On its initial release, this game was riddled with bugs and issues, and for most people was not only completely unplayable, but also lost so much of what made Fallout great in the first place. Nowadays though, after multiple large patches and years of work, the game is actually pretty good, albeit different. But nonetheless, the Vault itself was one of 17 designated control vaults for Vault-Tec and was home to some of America's best and brightest, including top students from Vault-Tec University and the former White House Chief of Staff. What made this structure especially interesting though, is that it actually is, as far as we know up to this point, one of the earliest vaults to actually open its doors, and in terms of games and the shows, it's by far the earliest point in the timeline that we get to see. Because after only 20 years post the bombs falling and the start of the Great War, the happy day of reclamation, as it was called, began, and the doors swung open ready for the inhabitants to reclaim the world and make it better. And maybe the most ironic part of it all is that compared to every other Fallout game, 76 looks the least destroyed and most lush of them all. But that's probably in large part due to it being set in the forested Appalachia region of West Virginia, as opposed to a major metropolitan area which would have been a major focus of nuclear targeting systems. But seriously, look at Fallout 3, which takes place 200 years after the bombs fell, and it still looks like they literally just dropped yesterday, compared to 76, where you were playing about 25 years after the fallout, and it looks pristine. It's kind of funny. Part of the reason though is that radiation doesn't actually affect fauna, meaning the overgrown landscape in a non-heavily targeted area like this would potentially actually make a lot of sense, like we also see around the Chernobyl nuclear zone in our real lives. Regardless though, Vault 76 is still without a doubt one of the most happy and tame stories in the entire series, with so many facilities in the actual vault itself for having fun, eating great meals, and just enjoying others and their company. Or in other words, a great vault full of amenities and nice people alike that then gets set loose in one of the best and most beautiful places still left on Earth. And finally, I wanted to go over what just might be the scariest and most horrifying vault in the history of Fallout. And it's not what you're expecting, because Vault 63 in Fallout 76 is anything but flashy. In fact, as of writing this, it hasn't even been officially released to the game, but will be here in just a couple of weeks. And while after the release it surely will not be too terrifying or gruesome, the reason it's horrifying right now, and the reason I wanted to put it as the last on my list, is because, well, because of the fear of the unknown. After all, isn't that the real scariest thing about all of these vaults in Fallout? The wild experiments you have to uncover, the sadistic stories you must piece together from terminal logs or environmental storytelling, and that rush of adrenaline you get from stepping inside of one of these human dungeons for the first time. Because it's that very essence which makes Fallout as a series so special in the first place, and even more so, the vault being such a key part of that. Because no matter what crazy stories or twists and turns we will get from future games and shows, remember that the fear of the unknown, of what's out there, has always been at the heart of why we love vaults so much, and also the true key to what makes them so insane and scary. Simply the idea of knowing that so many still lie undiscovered and that there's so much more for us to find out there is what makes this series so great, especially when a lot of it is probably extremely heinous things we couldn't even imagine. And that's why we all love Fallout.